Joining us now, we have Bloomberg News senior White House correspondent Josh Wingrove and our Middle East reporter Dan Williams. Dan, I want to start with you. CENTCOM is saying the overnight strikes were to swiftly punish Iran for the death of those 2 American service members at that airbase in Jordan. Can you just kind of give us a layout of what we know happened overnight? There's also been some mixed messaging. This morning, there was an alert from the U.S. Embassy in Jordan saying that the airport and some other facilities there had been evacuated due to security concerns, and we now have a headline crossing the terminal saying Jordan is saying that is not true. So we're not quite sure what's going on there, but tell us what else is going on in the region.
Good morning. Yes, there's some mixed messaging from Jordan. No doubt there's a great deal of consternation there. This is a country that really finds itself not just in the line of fire, but the target repeatedly of Iranian strikes since this flare-up dating back several days now. And obviously the site of those American casualties, 2 fatalities, 1 missing, several wounded, bringing the American death toll in this war to 16, and certainly ramping up expectations in the United States, in the administration, that the U.S. response should be severe and may actually be designed to spiral even further. As for where I am right now in Israel, this country, despite having launched the war with the U.S. on February 28th, has been sitting out this resumption of hostilities between Iran and the United States. There may be several reasons for that, and it may soon end. The Americans are now openly deploying refueling jets to Israel. There was some stationed here, but some had been withdrawn or relocated. Latest reports from Israeli media, there could be as many as 100 U.S. refueling jets on their way here now, which suggests something very big is in the offing, and in fact, that Israel could find itself involved one way or the other. As for the overnight strikes, the Americans seem to be hitting more and more inland in Iran and also in the Strait of Hormuz, which obviously is the choke point, is the focus of this latest flare-up. I think historians will look back at this and may even call this the War of Hormuz rather than the Iran war. It would seem that either side, the 2 main parties now waging this war, Iran and the U.S., want to have the final say as to who does, and more importantly, does not control and call the shots over international traffic in that strategic waterway.
I want to turn to Josh Wingrove in the greater Bedminster area, traveling with the president as he gears up for executive time, which I think is slated to start at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Josh, let me ask you about what we've heard from the president in recent hours. I know News Nation got the president on the phone, and I'll quote here from a piece on News Nation's site. Asked about Iran's announcement that it was no longer abiding by a U.S.-Iran memorandum of understanding, Trump replied, quote, "I couldn't care less," which prompted a response on Twitter from the Supreme Leader, indicating here that the signature of the U.S. president is utterly worthless and devoid of credibility. So we see the back and forth militarily, the back and forth rhetorically, as well. Just picking up on what Dan said a moment ago, that something very big seems to be in the offing here. What do we know of the U.S.'s plans going forward?
You've had radio silence over the weekend, really, other than those brief remarks you just read out from the president. So there is, I guess you could call it a strategic ambiguity publicly in the position that the Americans are taking. The CENTCOM statement had some phrasing that I think is notable, whether it's a head fake or not, but they talked about holding account the members of the Revolutionary Guard Corps who took on this attack. Trump has in the past distinguished between Iran doing stuff, its leadership doing stuff, and individual factions doing stuff. So that phrasing could mean nothing, or it could be them kind of leaving a off-ramp, if they ever were to want it, to chalk up some of this stuff to sort of, unnecessary or fluke kind of actions. But Trump himself was sort of, keen to wrap this up. Now he seems keen to let it keep going. We just simply don't know how long the runway on that is going to be. Of course, we've seen relief on gasoline prices here in the U.S. That has been the key political pressure point for the president. As long as that remains the case, I don't expect we'll see a lot of Republican lawmakers in particular speaking out or calling for some kind of return to the table to restore the ceasefire.
Dan, you mentioned the concern about the next phase of the war. I was talking to some folks in the region today. They've been getting a lot of signals from their security folks that this is nowhere near over. And they flagged something that you said you'd seen on Israeli TV last night, that they're so worried about this next wave of attack and what it's going to look like, especially regarding drones, that Israel is considering banning even civilian drones for a prolonged period of time. Is that realistic? And what does that mean for where this could be going?
I think it's going to be a tall order. There is a small but muscular cohort of amateur drone operators in Israel. However, given that the Israelis have bled, their soldiers have suffered and died in many cases in southern Lebanon due to Hezbollah's very effective use of drones of the kind you could buy at high-end toy stores, specifically drones that are operated with fiber optic cables, which basically defy traditional electronic jamming. The Israelis are worried that this could spread elsewhere. There are unconfirmed reports that even in Gaza, despite Hamas being very much on the back foot there, they have been receiving such drones into their very rudimentary arsenal. There are worries it could be in the West Bank as well. And indeed, Syria, which doesn't have open, peaceful contacts with Israel, but nonetheless finds itself on the same side as Israel against what's known as the Iranian axis, Hezbollah and the like, announced just 2 days ago that it had stopped on the way in from Iraq a truck full of these drones that were intended for Hezbollah in Lebanon. That just shows the ease with which these small, cheap objects can be transported. They're very effective, very low tech, and very threatening to the Israelis.
I want to play a bit of sound here from Kay Bailey Hutchison. She was, of course, a senator from Texas and then the U.S. ambassador to NATO, and she and I sat down together at the Aspen Security Forum a few days ago, and we talked about kind of the prospects of further negotiations going forward, the difficulty of that in light of what's happened with this memo of understanding. Let's take a listen to what she had to say about how she sees the path forward.
It's a negotiation like we've never had before, at least in my memory, where you negotiate with an adversary that is doing terrible things. You think you have an agreement, and it's not an agreement on the other side. And that has been difficult. I think the U.S. has been patient. We've worked with allied neighbors in the Middle East to get their support, but also to help them, because Iran is turning on its own neighbors. And I think the president's patience is wearing out, that's for sure. And I can tell you Congress's patience is wearing out. And so I think we are going to have to see maybe more bold measures to just finish this job.
Military measures.
It could have to be military measures. And I think the president has shown that he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to kill people. He doesn't want to put our troops in harm's way. But when you can't rely on even a memorandum of understanding, you've got to start looking for other measures that would make a difference.
Josh Wingrove, I want to go to you on this point. So we have a president who, for his entire career, has been a very proud deal maker, and I'm curious sort of how he sees what's happened here, or your sense of how he sees what's happened here, putting his son-in-law, his trusted friend and advisor, in charge of doing this negotiation, and now seeing it fall apart in the way in which it has. Any indication from him of how much frustration he has and what the path forward might be, aside from military action that we've seen in recent days?
And as vice president.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people wrapping their arms around this thing right now. No, he has not betrayed any of his frustration publicly. I agree with her comment about him losing patience with this, but Trump in the past, that kind of can go two ways, right? That can either be escalation or him kind of, you know, throwing his toys on the ground and walking to another thing for a little while. And we just simply don't know where that is going to land. So I don't want to speculate too much. I think, though, the political question here is tricky for the president. He has repeatedly noted that Iran's Navy is destroyed, that their Air Force is destroyed. He's cast them as sort of completely militarily defeated. So for the average viewer back home, you know, Americans who are sort of tuning in and out in their day-to-day lives, you would forgive them for being confused as to why this is still dragging on and why this is presenting such a thorny situation for the American forces in the region. And so the longer this drags on, I think the more those questions grow. And again, I think the energy prices are going to be a super key driving political factor. Trump is, of course, as every domestic viewer knows, trying to hold on to the House in particular, the Senate as well, of course, in these midterm elections, and trying to defy history and kind of pulling out all the stops to do that. And I think that will remain a big political calculus for him, including whether he has the vice president re-engage, whether he himself re-engages, whether they ramp up strikes, whether they consider some of these reported limited options that we've seen, including, you know, potential targeted boots on the ground scenarios on Carg Island or whatnot. I think all of this is sort of hanging under a complicated political landscape for him.
Dan, adding to the politics, I want to talk about the politics of the region right now because the State Department has issued this travel warning saying it advises Americans worldwide and especially in the Middle East to exercise increased caution. Groups supportive of Iran may target other U.S. interests overseas or locations associated with the United States and or Americans throughout the world. This administration focuses a lot on the military power, but regional allies have tried to ramp up the soft power, the diplomatic power, because it is very hard for the U.S. right now to exercise that in these embassies, which have essentially been on lockdown since this conflict began. Can you talk about the safety of these installations around the region and also civilians? I think about these places like Dubai, like Abu Dhabi, that had this image of being safe, gleaming cities on the hill, and what that's doing for them and for their economies.
I think the sense of safety in those sites, those metropolitan sites, have been very popular, not just for those involved in international finance, but tourism. Confidence has been shaken already during the course of this war. I think there was some surprise, including those countries, that they came so quickly under Iranian retaliatory attacks, including against civilian targets, hotels and the like. This warning would not be especially surprising there. I think those countries have weathered the damage, perhaps trying to keep on top of whatever renewed reputational damage there might be in the wake of this latest U.S. warning. What we're really seeing here is a reference to second-tier, downstream terrorist retaliation, subnational, perhaps international, as a result potentially of Iran running out of traditional upfront military options in the face of a much more powerful U.S. foe and, until recently, Israeli foe as well. It would appear the Americans, perhaps the Israelis too, have intelligence indications that Iran or Iran's supporters worldwide may be preparing to resort to this. That may be part of the reason for the reported evacuation of that southern Jordanian port in the Red Sea, which, by the way, is right across the water from Eilat, Israel's Red Sea port. As you noted, the Jordanian state denied what the U.S. Embassy had said about the evacuation of that port and the nearby airport. Nonetheless, it shows that really they're taking no risks here. That could, and in fact it has in the past, been the target of terrorist attack, a mortar attack, I think some 12 or 14 years ago.
Josh Wingrove, very quickly here, set the table for us. What does the rest of this weekend look like for President Trump? He's in New Jersey to hang out at his property, but also to go to this big game scheduled to take place a little later.
Yeah, he's going to. Yeah, happy World Cup final day. He's going to be handing out the trophy here. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney going to also be in attendance. People are watching that to see whether they actually meet Trump. Of course, there's been some tension with the Canadians in particular in the last few days that we over the wildfire smoke. So we'll see. I'm looking out at New Jersey now. The sky looks mercifully, smoke-free by comparison. So that's good, easing fears that the game would have had too much smoke or even, faced potential delays or whatnot. The first window to hear from the president is probably after the game, other than whatever remarks he makes during the ceremony. So on all these topics, including Iran, I think we're going to have to wait to the end of the day to maybe hear from him to see if he speaks to some of the reporters traveling with him on the plane. So that is a big Sunday for him.